Welcome to This Explainer. You know, today we're going to dive deep right below the surface of the modern schooling system to uncover what is actually being taught in our classrooms. Just think back to your own school days for a second. You probably remember the math tests, right? The history dates, the reading assignments, all that stuff. But what if I told you the absolutely most important lessons you absorbed weren't on the syllabus at all? Let's just jump right in. There's this incredibly eye-opening quote from the American industrialist John D. Rockefeller that goes, "I don't want a nation of thinkers, I want a nation of workers." Wow, right? I mean, that perfectly frames the entire mystery we're unraveling today. It really begs the question, is our education system actually designed to make us independent critical thinkers, or is it fundamentally structured to make us compliant components of a giant industrial machine? Section 1, the financial literacy push. So to really understand the root of this whole problem, we first need to look at a massive, modern attempt to fix our educational gaps. Organizations have literally been trying to plug these gaps for decades. Take groups like the Jumpstart Coalition, for example. They have incredibly noble goals. They've been working collaboratively since way back in 1995, championing April as National Financial Literacy Month and really aiming to bring practical money skills into every single elementary, middle, and high school in the country. And hey, the intention here is absolutely flawless. We want to equip kids with the knowledge to manage their future wealth and navigate the modern economy. But here is where we hit a massive disconnect in the data. Despite decades of advocacy and brand new curriculums, only 57% of adults in the United States are currently deemed financially literate. That means nearly half the country still lacks the basic knowledge to manage their financial resources effectively for lifetime security. Half. And the crucial point here is that this widespread lack of personal financial knowledge, it isn't just some minor academic failure. It has a catastrophic real-world impact. We are talking about a cost to U.S. households of a staggering $350 billion every single year. That is real wealth totally lost to poor decisions, debt, and just a fundamental lack of planning. Section 2. Why facts alone fail. If dedicated groups are pouring all these resources into teaching students these vital facts, why is the system still failing to produce financially capable adults? Well, if a lack of information isn't the root problem, what is? This is the exact curiosity gap we need to bridge today. Because let's be honest, simply throwing more math equations at students or making them memorize the formula for compound interest over and over, it just isn't changing their behavior. If the information is right there for the taking, why on earth aren't the outcomes improving? Get this. Research shows that improved financial literacy, meaning just knowing the information, explains a mere 0.1% of actual behavior changes. 0.1%. That is practically invisible. You could completely ace a test on compound interest, but that absolutely does not mean you won't go out and max out a credit card on a totally spontaneous weekend trip. The real problem is that standard education treats learning purely as a technical data transfer, just math, budgeting facts, and pure logic. But it completely ignores the psychological and emotional environment. And here's the kicker. Over 90% of the decisions we make are driven by emotions, not logic. If a school teaches you math, but the environment teaches you to fear mistakes, feel stressed out about constant evaluation, and just passively wait around for instructions, well, your psychological relationship with money is going to be incredibly compromised. Section 3, the hidden curriculum. To really understand these unspoken rules and why the environment completely overrides the facts, we have to look below the waterline of the iceberg at a fascinating sociological concept. Way back in 1968, a scholar named Philip Jackson actually coined the term hidden curriculum. He explained that education is really a process of secondary socialization. Basically, children aren't just learning what is written on the chalkboard. They are constantly like a sponge, observing adult behavior, school routines, and how mistakes are handled. They're learning what kind of people are valued and exactly what kind of behavior is acceptable in our society. Now, if we look impartially at this through different sociological lenses, we see a pretty wide spectrum. Functionalists, for instance, view the hidden curriculum as a positive necessity for social order, teaching kids punctuality and the value of achievement. On the other hand, feminists know how it can subconsciously enforce traditional gender norms, maybe by giving more attention to disruptive boys or subtly steering girls away from STEM fields. And then Marxists argue it strictly trains students for workplace obedience, basically teaching them to accept a hierarchy where they're managed by an authority figure. So how does this all build our iceberg?
Well, while schools are officially testing the formal curriculum, the algebra, the history, the financial facts, they are simultaneously hardwiring a covert curriculum right into every student's daily routine. You are rewarded for sitting still, asking for permission to speak, and moving only when a bell rings. It's conformity over creativity.
Section 4, the Prussian factory model. To discover the exact origins of schooling and really figure out why it instills obedience rather than independent thought, we literally have to travel back in time. We can trace the origins of the modern classroom all the way back to 18th century Prussia. Check this out. After a crushing military defeat by Napoleon's army in 1806, the Prussian military desperately needed soldiers who would blindly follow orders, instead of, running away when the shooting started. So they instituted a top-down, tax-funded schooling system focused entirely on respect and obedience to authority. Later in the 19th century, this model was perfectly repurposed for the Industrial Revolution. By 1843, American reformer Horace Mann was actually so impressed by this system that he brought it over to Massachusetts, and from there it spread like wildfire across the globe. The futurist Alvin Toffler perfectly summarized this historical pivot. He noted that mass education was essentially an ingenious machine constructed by industrialism to produce the kind of adults it needed. Industrialists needed workers who could endure long hours of tedious, repetitive indoor toil without questioning management. The goal wasn't to create philosophers, visionaries, or critical thinkers. It was simply to create a reliable, completely predictable workforce. What sociologists call the correspondence principle shows us exactly how the inner life of the school became an anticipatory mirror for the factory floor. The parallels are absolutely wild. The factory whistle, that became the school bell. Workers at assigned stations became students at assigned desks. Repetitive physical labor was perfectly mirrored by rote memorization, and managers were seamlessly replaced by authoritative teachers. The structure matches point for point, down to the letter.
Section 5, rethinking how we learn. Okay, so if we know that the hidden curriculum of the old Prussian factory system suppresses independent thought, how do we actually fix things like financial literacy? How do we finally move forward?
Well, early childhood researchers point out that we must actively shape a positive hidden curriculum. Because children learn by observing, adults have to model respectful, empathetic behavior. We need to create inclusive environments where curiosity is actively rewarded. And most importantly, we have to support a growth mindset where mistakes are viewed as essential steps in learning rather than punishable offenses. Think about it. If a child is completely terrified of getting a failing grade in school, they're going to be utterly terrified of making a necessary, complex financial decision as an adult. Financial expert Brent Weiss actually calls this the continuum of care. This brilliant framework demonstrates that true learning requires way more than just facts. Yes, of course, you need knowledge. That's step one. But you absolutely must integrate that knowledge with behavioral tools, supportive environments that naturally foster healthy habits, and lifelong planning. It's really about fundamentally changing the whole ecosystem of how we approach learning and behavior. I'm going to leave you with this final provocative thought to ponder. As the Brazilian educator Rubem Alves once suggested, are our schools teaching children how to fly, or are they just building better cages? The next time you look at our education system, or even just wonder why you feel stressed about your own finances, ask yourself who this system was truly built to serve. Thanks so much for joining me on this explainer, and remember, keep questioning the curriculum, especially the hidden one.